It was horrendous. The first 20 minutes, I just felt sick. I felt nervous. You come out, the dogs are you can feel the dogs spit on your face, barking into your face. The DSs are shouting at you. We were after running. We must have been after running 5K, doing burpees, sit-ups, pull-ups, everything, like crawling along the ground. And the funny thing is, and even watching it back on TV, it looks like it lasts for 5 minutes, and really, like, each activity could last for 5 hours. And it was I'll never forget the first 20 minutes. I remember actually, like, I was like, I wonder if I prayed to God.
Clara, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries at all. Looking forward to the chat. Obviously, there's been a lot going on recently with, your appearance on the Special Forces, or the Ultimate Hell Week. I'd say that was, yeah. I'm looking forward to getting into it. But before we go there, I have been starting the podcast with just getting an insight into your childhood or the early years, and just trying to get an understanding of your journey up until this point and kind of what's happened along the way to make you who you are. So, do you want to take me back there and we'll start?
Yeah. My childhood was very, very normal. There's only me and my brother. We're very close in age. Sport was a big part of our childhood, especially the GAA. We're both very competitive, and we both ended up playing on the same hurling team and same Gaelic football team the whole way up to under 14 until I had to play with the girls. So we're very much involved sport-wise. I was never as good as him underage. He was always fitter than me. So he used to get a dig in here and there, running rings around me. But other than that, childhood was pretty much standard, living in the countryside, out until the dark, in for dinner. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, straight away there, I can kind of understand where this competitive kind of drive must have come from, from what you're saying there. And up on, like, say, coming into, say, your teenage years and growing up there, was there any kind of significant points where, you felt there was a big change in your personality or anything like that? Any big moments along the way?
I suppose I was very young going to school. I had just turned 4. So I did the Leaving Cert when I was 16, and then headed off to college. And that for me was the first time in my life that I was like, oh, fuck, what is this? I suppose living where I did in the countryside, we didn't, we kind of, that's where we were most of the time. We weren't going to teenage discos. We weren't hanging out in the States. We didn't live that life. And I went from literally out playing on the road with my friends to going up to Dublin to college. And that for me was the first time in my life that I thought, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. Secondary school, I loved secondary school. Again, sports was a big part in the Mercy. We'd basketball and camogie, and that really got me through. I always knew I wanted to do primary school teaching, and as a result of that, I had to go away. Like, I had to go to Dublin or to Limerick, and I went to Dublin. But they were probably, in one way, the worst years of my life. I know people say college are the best years of your life, not when you're 16. you know I used to cry every Sunday. Just didn't want to go there. And the only reason that I kept going back was because I just needed that degree,
Yeah.
But for me, socially, everything just kind of fell apart. I basically lived like a hermit for 3 years. I just didn't leave my room. It's crazy looking back. I didn't want to make friends. I just wanted to get through the day, get through the week, get through the semester, and get through the 3 years. And as soon as I could, I was back home. I just felt safe there.
Okay. So yeah, like, obviously from what you're after saying there, that makes sense, growing up in the country, and then obviously Dublin is so big. And, I think that's a big thing for a lot of people, is kind of coming out of your shell, especially, growing up in Ireland. I feel like people can get very comfortable in, like, their own environment, and then when it does come time to branch out, it can be a big deal. How did that affect you mentally, like, say, being up in that environment where, like, obviously you said that you were very it was very stressful and you were very upset over it. But did you did it improve over time, or was it the whole way through?
To be honest, my last year was probably the best year. It was one of those things that I knew I just had to do.
Mm,
And the quicker it was done, the quicker I could get home, the quicker I could start my teaching career and do what I wanted to do, really.
yeah.
Um, I looking back now at the time, I was just like, it's just something I have to do. I wasn't too hard on myself. I was upset, but it wasn't anything too mad.
Okay.
Um, then when we finished then college, then I was straight back home. I got a job down in Waterford, and that was it. Kind of that was the start for me.
Okay. And so going from that point then, from when you came back from Waterford, where did you go from there?
Well, with teaching, you have a lot of opportunities. So I've been teaching for the last 11 years. Oh my God. Thinking about that now.
Mhm.
But it lended itself to a lot of opportunities. So I was able to travel with teaching. I did a year in Dubai teaching. I think every teacher of this generation does at this stage, but
Mm.
I did a year out there. I got the opportunity to teach, to volunteer teach in Uganda in Africa. I
Wow.
taught out in Spain and over in America. So I, when I finished college, it was then I kind of took the opportunities. It was almost as if college set me up for it's actually okay to do things on your own for once and
Mm.
to kind of leave the nest. And when I did the first thing, say my confidence grew, and then I said, okay, I'll do something again next year and do something again next year. So over the course of the last 11 years, I've got huge opportunities, and every single one that I got, I took,
Mm.
even when it came to teaching jobs. Teaching is the best job in the world once you're permanent. And I think every teacher will agree with me. It's
Mm.
so stressful if you're not permanent and you're looking for sub and here, there. But when I was made permanent, it just, it kind of solidified everything, and everything that I was always working for kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Um,
That's unreal. I really wasn't expecting to say that, after coming back from Dublin that you were going to be going off for a year here and a year there. That's unbelievable. And like what brought you to do that after, going up to Dublin and hating it so much, and, then to come home, as you said, you're a bit of a home bird, and then to just want to go off again.
I suppose I was in a kind of a situation which was funny because I finished college when I was 18,
Mm.
and um, a lot of my friends that were my age were just starting college then.
Mm.
And it was a case of I could have stayed and lived that kind of college life at a better age when I was 18, or got these opportunities to lead to getting a job, a good job here teaching. So I saw my friends, especially when I was living in Waterford and they were going out on the student nights on a Wednesday night. And I was like, this is actually not just not for me.
Mm.
I'm not getting anything from it. And so I kind of went the other way, and I said, you know what, I'd actually like to go off on my own to experience it. And what was the first one? The first one that I did was I went over to Uganda during the summer volunteer teaching. So we did a lot of fundraising here. And then I went as part of a group that I didn't previously know. We
Mm.
kind of met each other in the airport, for the first time properly. And we spent 4 months out in Uganda teaching and building houses and schools and stuff over there. And after that experience, I was like, wow, like there's so much to the world.
Mm.
I really want to see it. And I suppose I was after maturing in age, I was nearly hitting my 20s. And it was as if my confidence, my self esteem, everything was kind of coming together. And I was at that social age where I was like, oh, yeah, I'm enjoying this now. It's not like when I went to college and stuff. So
Mm.
although college, like I didn't have a great experience, it lended itself to what was to follow.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And, for anyone listening, I think it is a very important kind of conversation to hear. I was only talking to one of my friends the other day, and we were talking about, I was saying he should go over and move over to Australia. He's always just lived in Waterford his whole life. And he was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I ever could. I'd just be too scared and that. So, like, how do you think that, like, for anyone listening, like, how do you think that I suppose shaped you into who you are today? Like, what were the lessons you learned along the way, or like, would you say to people who are kind of thinking that, who might be in the same position that you would have been in those years ago?
Oh, I would literally say take every opportunity you can. Like I know people throw around saying you only live once, but you do. And for me, now I couldn't do those things that I did back then, and I feel like in your life there's a certain time for everything, and if you don't take the opportunity, then it might never come up again.
Mm.
And it is a huge thing. And there were times, when I moved to Dubai, like I told my mom and dad a week before I went, I was like, I just have enough. It was we were actually watching the final of the darts. It was around Christmas, and I said, you know what, I have enough. I'm going to Dubai in January. And everybody thought I was mad. Some people didn't even realize I was going until a month later when I was over there. And there were days that were horrendous and I was homesick and all the rest. But looking back to the person that was then and the person that I am now, like, there's so many lessons that I learned along the way. You couldn't even name them, just socially and emotionally, how much you mature and how resilient you become, because you're not dependent on the support of like your parents or your friends or those closest around you, that you really get to find who you are as a person. It's nearly like a journey to find yourself, and I know people say, oh, they go to Thailand to find themselves on these holidays and stuff, but it really is, every single experience that you have in life does shape you,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I have this thing inside me where I just want to be the best version of myself. I don't judge anybody else's life. I don't compete. I'm not looking to be like anybody else, but I just want the best version of my life, that any controllable that I have in my life, I want to be able to control it and become the best.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and I think that it's very inspirational to kind of hear that in someone. And I think for a lot of people, like you grow up, you get comfortable, and people just get comfortable being comfortable, and you really don't know what you're missing out, or you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, if you never get out and kind of experience these things, then there's not much doors that can be opened, just staying in the same town. So coming back then, so from a training point of view, when you were, say, done traveling and stuff like that, I know I met you when we were in Warriors a couple of years ago. Like, what was your training journey kind of like around that time?
Yeah, when I actually came home from Dubai that time, my friend was in CrossFit in Warriors, and I said, "Oh, I'll give it a go." And literally, the minute I walked in the door, I was like, "Oh yes, this is it. I am home," and I absolutely loved it. I started training there, and do you know what? It was just the best thing ever. It was just a different type of training, where you're able to push yourself every single day. And I did that for a year or two, and then I found myself in a relationship that just dragged me to a place that I've never been before, and I never want to be again. And as a result of that, I stopped training. I started eating unhealthy, and I just became a different person, and it really annoyed me because I had done so much work to come to the stage where I was, and to be able to take any opportunity that came my way. And then all of a sudden, then when you find yourself around a narcissist, and anybody that ever has been around a narcissist knows what I'm talking about, but you just become a different person, and it's a horrible, horrible place to be. And I went from being this bright, bubbly person that loved training, I loved getting out, I loved meeting my friends, to nobody saw me for a few years. My life was consumed by the life of somebody else, and it revolved around them.
Mm.
And as a result, I ended up in such a terrible, terrible place. Yeah, and that was kind of rock bottom for me. I was lucky enough in that I had the support of my friends and my family. It was never straightforward,
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with everyone. When you're in the situation yourself, you don't see it for what it is, and
Mm.
it doesn't matter who talks to you or who's trying to get you out of that situation. You're not going to listen. Eventually, I did get out of that situation, and I found myself in a much better place where I was going back training. I was doing a bit here and there, But I never dealt with certain things that had happened back in the previous years. And it was like it just came around in a circle every now and again. You just find yourself hitting a patch, and I just never got help. Like, I never talked about it. It was literally one day, it was just never spoken about again. I didn't mention it. My family didn't mention it. My friends didn't mention it. It was just like, okay, let's everyone just move on and just don't talk to Clara about that. I was lucky enough then to have my son a few years after that. And I emotionally ate, I'd say, for 2 years, from the point that I found out I was pregnant until I had him. And it was horrendous, because anyone who's pregnant or has ever been pregnant knows how hard it is, being sick and everything else. But the weight I put on was awful, and I was really upset with myself. I literally couldn't look in the mirror. I used to have the mirror in my room covered. I would refuse to look in it. I knew I had changed, because my clothes, everything. And for me, I just couldn't see myself ever coming back to that person that had done all the traveling, that had achieved so much. I just couldn't. And it was like something, and I always say it, the day I had my son, I was rushed in for an emergency section, and literally something happened that day. I don't know what it is. And I remember speaking to the midwife about it, but it was like a switch flicked. And I was like, this is not me, like, snap out of it. You need to be better, and not just better for you now. There's somebody, a little baby here looking up at you, who only has you. And it was literally from that day on, my whole life flipped 180. I can't even describe it. Like, it was literally like, I don't know, would you use the word epiphany? But that was the day that I took control of my life.
Wow, like that was, geez, there's a lot I kind of want to touch on from there. Like, number one, obviously, coming back to kind of relationships for a second, I think this is a topic that, a lot of people could do with some insight on. I feel, as kind of I was saying earlier on, with, people getting comfortable, being comfortable, and, you see it quite a lot, like people getting sucked into relationships, and not sucked in, but, they get into a relationship and their whole life changes. Everything else around them just kind of gets discarded, and you just fall into this hole, and it's, for a lot of people, it's very hard to get out of. So what, like, looking back on that, what advice would you give to yourself back then, if you could see the situation that you were in then, looking back on it from now, what would you say to that person to try come out of that situation?
Just don't lose touch with your friends and your family. I shut everybody out. Everybody who was good to me and supported me, it was almost as if I took it out on them. I took out the frustration of my relationship out on them, when it should have been the opposite way around. I should have got out of the relationship and gone back to my friends and family, but instead I did the opposite. I was like, no, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. This is my life. This is what I want to do. And yeah, I suffered the consequences, mentally, physically, emotionally, it all, like. And it wasn't until, strangely enough, it was funny, because I had a moment when I was like, do I really want to be in this situation? And I think when you're young, you're vulnerable, and I had somehow talked myself into, right, this is my first proper relationship and nobody else is going to love me. And I think when you're going out with a narcissist, and you're kind of indirectly been told that this is it, like, nobody else is going to love you like me, you have to stay with me, even though I treat you like shit, like, this is the way it's going to be, and you just have to deal with it. And I think, for me, I went through that for so long. One day I was with my boyfriend at the time, and I saw my granddad, just across the way. We were in the same restaurant, and I saw him across the way, and I just broke down crying, and I was like, oh my God, what would he think of me doing this to myself? Like, I'm literally terrorizing myself. What would he think? And that was it. That was the end for me. I was like, no, I just got up and left, and that was it. So it's funny, the little things that can set you off and put you back on the right road, you know.
Absolutely.
But that was what happened for me.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, like I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that, even if like you weren't with a narcissist or whatever. Just looking back on relationships, you can get very blindsided to everything. Yeah, everything. And I think for relationships to work, from my looking back on my relationships and stuff as well, that didn't work out. I think the number one thing that the number one kind of common denominator is when you stop working on yourself, you fall into that hole, and it's very hard to drag yourself out of that hole then, once you're reliant on that person for happiness, for conversation, for company, for support, for motivation.
Mm.
And when you become reliant on someone for all those things, you start to convince yourself that you're not able to do it yourself anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so hard for a lot of people to step away. And yeah, look, that's crazy, Clara. Like, but I'd say it's something that is very relatable to a lot of people. Yeah, and look, obviously you're on the other side of it now. And do you feel like that you would ever kind of allow yourself to be sucked into a situation like that? Like, what do you look out for now when you're looking for, say, a companion?
Oh God, like, no, I definitely wouldn't. Like, there's a lot of things that have happened even since then. I've done a master's in psychology, so I'm well aware of what not to be looking out for in a relationship. But I definitely do think, speaking from experience, the best relationship is one that, like you said, you are constantly working on yourself, and equally your partner is working on themselves, and then you find that mutual ground in the middle.
Mm,
And unless somebody, I live by, somebody can complement my life but not complicate it. And if you're
mm,
in my life and you're complicating it, then you're not going to be in my life. And that's not just for relationships, but for friendships. I keep my circle close. My closest friends who know me know that I've zero tolerance for anyone that's not going to add anything to my life, or I can't add anything to their life. I think there's a lot of people that just drain you. A lot of pessimistic people in the world, and I find myself gravitating towards those people that uplift me, and that progress, like allow me to progress and develop as a person.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it does have to be mutual, that kind of, because some people move forward in life, some people stay still.
Yeah.
And I think the people who stay still cling on to anyone in their life who's moving forward to kind of be brought with them,
Yeah.
and if you're that person who is being kind of clung on to, it can be very, as you said, draining mentally and stuff. And I think it is a skill that you pick up over time, being able to kind of separate yourself from these situations and be able to identify these things. Because when you are young, or you don't have a lot of experience in it, all you see is, like, say, them as a person, you know what I mean? And you might look at your history, or you might look at, we had these great times together, and you feel this kind of sense of loyalty to a person.
Yeah.
But when it's only kind of when you step out, I find anyway, when you step away from those situations, you're looking back in, then you can really see it for what it is. And then it's a lesson learned kind of going forward then, and being able to, identify it. So again, for anyone who is listening, I think that, yeah, if you do struggle to identify these things, just don't like freak out over or whatever. Like, just try and constantly be trying to move forward yourself, and then eventually you will kind of start to be able to cop these things. But yeah, no, that thanks for giving me an insight on that, Clara, because it's a very hard thing to talk about with stuff like that. And yeah, but anyways, coming back to your training, you said once you got out, you got back to yourself and you got training and whatever. The CrossFit, can I just ask you a few things about the CrossFit? What were some lessons you have learned from the CrossFit, and kind of what did you take from that period of time? And the reason I'm asking is because, obviously I have the background in bodybuilding, and I've done that, kind of branching out now. I'm going to Bali in January, and one of the things I do want to experiment is with CrossFit. And obviously you have experience with it. So what are the benefits you've gotten from that, or what have you taken from CrossFit?
Well, I mean, there's so many. I think it teaches you a lot of life skills as well as from a training perspective. Being in a CrossFit gym, people say they're cliquey. I think you only really get it if you're involved in it. It is a competitive environment, but you're competitive with yourself. You want to improve on yourself, but equally you're surrounded by like-minded people. So there is that little bit of edginess, a little bit of fire. And there's nothing that I enjoy more than going in, on a Saturday morning and just being able to compete with people beside me and come out a better person for it. But I just think CrossFit is it kind of hits so many different areas of exercise, from strength to gymnastics to, your flexibility, your endurance, your sprint. It does hit a lot of boxes. And when you're going to a gym that's so well set up, like Warriors, that has, excellent coaches that are really, really knowledgeable and willing to transfer those skills and give them to you, I think you're onto a winner. And that's where I would have started off originally, in Warriors. And as well as doing the classes, I was kind of doing a little bit of conditioning on the side, and that's where I would have originally met my coach. And I felt like I wasn't getting any benefit from just doing a class a day. Now my whole nutrition was off the walls as well, but that would have been where I originally met my coach. And I just said, please take me on. My friend had just moved to Canada, so I knew he had a space because he'd gotten rid of her. So I was like, please, Kate has gone to Canada, can you please take me on? And he said, yeah, but you have to want it. So for me, that was kind of the starting point of my, say, sporting journey, or my physical journey, where it took me from there.
Brilliant. And that's Tony Sullivan, is it?
Yeah.
Are you still with Tony now?
Yeah, he's still coaching me.
Brilliant.
I don't know if he's happy about that or not now, but
but
I have to say he's one of the most knowledgeable men in the business. He practices what he preaches, and he is probably the reason that I've achieved so much that I have in the last 4 or 5 years. We're as mad as each other. I go to him with ideas, he comes to me with ideas, and he has really made me see that nothing is impossible, that I can actually do anything that I really put my mind to. So originally when I went to him, he said, this isn't going to be about how you look or how you weigh. This is about sorting your head out first. And that kind of stuck with me, so that's where I started just kind of getting into psychology into my mind and fixing problems that were there before I could ever dream of running a 5K or whatever it was back in the day that I was trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's so very important what you said there. And I only mentioned this on the last podcast I was on. Is like, where the mind goes, the body will follow. You need to fix up here before you start to worry about, like, getting a six pack or getting fit alone is not going to fix your mental problems. And so what were some other benefits of having a coach that you feel, really brought you to the next level? Because, I think misinterpretation people have about coaches is, it's just a training and nutrition plan and that's it. Now, for some coaches, that is the case, but for a lot, it can be so much more than that. So pretty much what other benefits did you get from, say, having a coach and that you wouldn't have thought of before?
Well, originally when I was going to him, obviously I thought, right, I'm just going to train with him once a week and, do a little check-in or whatever. And I never, at that point, never really thought about how my mind would adapt and change, and how my mindset, I went from having a very closed mindset to having a completely open growth mindset on what I could achieve and stuff. And I suppose goal setting was a huge thing for me. I didn't, I didn't change overnight or anything. Everything that I did was very much gradual. And Tony's excellent in that he sits down and he sets realistic expectations that weren't too far out. I think I started with him in September and he said, look, let's just work till December, and small achievable goals, ticking off boxes every day, back to basics. And the thing is, when you're under the supervision of somebody who's really, really knowledgeable, he's constantly reading books, he's constantly reading papers, and he has the science to back up every single thing he says. And it's funny because, I love listening to Andrew Huberman's podcast. I love reading papers myself, scientific papers. And it's funny because I'll always go back to him and say, geez, you're telling me this years. Why didn't I listen to you years ago? So I got more than a coach, I suppose. When I signed up, I got a mentor, I got a friend, and I just got somebody who believed in me. And it felt like the first time in my life somebody believed in me. Now, whether he did or not at the time, whether every PT says that to their client, it worked. And it's something that I took. The lessons that I took from Tony, I took myself, and I'm able to help other people. And even in my job, I deal with kids every day and their self-belief and stuff, and it's great. I never thought that those would be indirectly things that I would have learned from a PT.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, as you said before, it can be a very lonely journey when you are kind of doing this yourself, and then when you have someone to kind of share your victories with or share the hard days with, it can really just make a difference. Even just having someone you can text and be like, oh my god, I done this, and you get that that little buzz, and the little bit of praise from them and everything, it can make a huge difference. So moving on then, obviously I would like to talk about the Special Forces, the Ultimate Hell Week. So take me back to the start of that. Did you apply for that, or did they approach you?
No, I applied for it originally. So it was just an application form. And then I got a phone call. Oh God, do you know what? It was months later that I had forgotten about it. And I got a phone call, and then they offered me an interview over the phone. So I did 2 interviews on the phone. Then I went up, I did a fitness test, and then I ended up doing a kind of interview in front of the camera. So it was a long process before we actually got to the show.
Okay. And yeah, just talk me through that journey, that kind of experience, because obviously we see the bit when it hits the hits the screens or whatever, but I'm interested to see the kind of what goes on behind the process behind that, and what it was like from your perspective actually going through it.
I suppose I'll just go back to before I actually got there. It was kind of a mad notion that I had one night. I just started PT with Tony, and it was on the telly one night, and I was like, geez, I could do that. They're only climbing up a hill, I could do that. And my dad was like, why don't you sign up for it then? And I was like, okay, I will, but I'm not fit enough yet. So I kept training, and the lads in the gym are really good. They kind of sign up for things, and they get the crowd behind them. And we ended up doing a few half marathons. We ended up doing a few 10Ks. We ended up doing a few duathlons. And as I built my confidence with fitness, I went from being 120 kg when I started with Tony, and I managed to get down to around 80 kg. And I thought, geez, do you know what? I can actually do things now. And just been surrounded by those people in the gym and signing up for things, keeping busy, little goals along the way. The next thing for me was this Special Forces Hell Week. And I went to Tony and I said, look, you might think I'm mad, but I'm going to sign up for this thing. And he was like, look, I already know you're mad, but how the fuck are we going to train for this? So the build up to it, then, you know, my training just went absolutely through the roof. And it was during COVID. When I had Rory Oak, I ended up building a house and I was completely on my own. So it was just me and Rory Oak, and I was thinking, how am I going to get through COVID? I wanted to run back to my mom and dad's and just stay there in the safety blanket of my family. But I said, you know what? No, I ended up buying loads of gym equipment. I had a gym set up in my own bedroom and I trained every day in there when Rory Oak went to bed, and trained for hours. He used to be up till midnight. And my accountability for me was just putting up a post or putting up a story every day on Instagram. This is what I did. Now, people thought I was genuinely, after losing the run of myself, I used to have neighbors like call my parents, been like, is she okay? We met her out running really late last night and she had a weighted vest on. Do you know, so a lot of people in my area thought this one is on the way to Otterins or somewhere because she's not well. And you know what, looking back, yeah, you know, I did mad things, but trained really, really hard for it. Physically, you know, you get through it. Mentally, nothing can prepare you for it. And we went up to do the fitness test, got to meet a few people, ended up meeting another girl from Waterford, Aoife from Tramore, and I knew she'd get on it. If anybody knows Aoife Sullivan, I just knew she'd get on it. So we were on the bus then. Fast forward to the Hell Week bus. We're on the bus, and, you know, anyone who's watched the show before kind of knows that the bus never actually makes it to the camp. You know, there's going to be some sort of interference along the way. So in my head, I was mentally prepared. Dave, I was so mentally prepared. Tony had me in such a place that my bag was packed at the end of my bed. I was ready for them to kidnap me during the night. You know, it was just crazy thoughts, like, when I look back. Right, that's how ready I was. So the bus stopped anyway, got out of the bus, dogs barking, you know, and we were kind of like, you could see the cameras and we're kind of like, oh, there's the cameras. That lasted for about 2 seconds before we're like, oh shit. You know, I've never had it before, but there were 28 of us, and we, you know, when you make eye contact with somebody and you know exactly what that person's thinking, and that person is like, what have we signed up for? Into where we slept and stuff. The cameras are literally on 24/7. You're mic'd up 24/7. There's no escape, and you're just always on edge. You're always on edge. A frightening experience. Obviously there was crackheads. You know, you're just trying to get by. I went into it knowing it was a week of my life, and I suppose my mindset was, I am not going home unless it's for medical reasons. They will literally have to pull me off the course, because I felt, for me personally, on a personal journey, everything that had gone wrong in my life that I made up for by becoming more resilient through my training, through my thought process, whatever it may be, it all came down. For me, this was the finale for me. And no one was going to get in the way of me being able to pass this course. And it wasn't a case of me being selfish, but it was more of a case of, I wanted to help whoever I could get through with me. And it's a huge team effort, you know, everything that you're doing. Sorry.
And yeah, I was just going to ask there. So you mentioned there, like, mental resilience, and like obviously you have to build that up. You know, I think another thing that a lot of people think is that some people are just born like this, when I don't think it's the case. It's something that is kind of, you know, built up over time. And so just to kind of, I know it's kind of sidetracking here, but like with your training and stuff like that, is there any specific things that you do to kind of like to build that up, to get to that point? Like, what would you say to people who are looking to get to that point of just being so mentally resilient that you just do not accept quitting?
Do the things you hate. Like, you have to. And
Yeah.
it is, because I could go out into the gym there today and I could do my favorite movements and have a lovely training session. But honestly, it's the things that you don't want to do that change you as a person. I often used to set my alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning. I used to run a 10K in the morning and then go to, Gary used to have a class at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to that class afterwards. And did I ever enjoy getting up at 3 o'clock to run in the rain on a December's morning before actually going training? No, I didn't. But it's like every time I did it, I became a little bit more resilient, and I became a little bit stronger. So the next day I did it, it was a little bit easier. Now, I'm not saying I ever enjoyed it, but it just becomes part and parcel. And then I did this absolute ridiculous thing where I read David Goggins' book. And anybody who is on their journey to become resilient, that's one man that is probably the most resilient of us all. But I started listening to people like him and different podcasts, different books, and listening to other people. And it was the things that I hated doing. Like, I should say, like, I'm not a runner. I hate running, and I've always hated running, always. But I think for me to get to that next level, I had to prove certain things to myself. And, this year, I've ran 2 marathons this year, and it's something that, the old Clara, and I think that's, I do associate the person that I was 4 years ago as a totally different person. Like, that was not me. But the old Clara couldn't have even dreamt of doing the stuff that I've done in the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. I think that was so well answered, and there's such a good point there, and just do the things that you don't want to do, because I see it a lot with people who are going into the gym and they don't have a plan and stuff, and they're jumping on the machines that they know they can comfortably do, and it's great you're getting in, you're going to the gym, but if you really want that full effect of kind of moving forward as a person, do the hard stuff. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And sorry I cut across you there. So coming back to the show, what was the toughest part about it? Like, was there any kind of standout moments or challenges where, like, you're like, right, that was where I nearly broke?
For me, there probably were three points on day 2. So the first night, we obviously had done all the combat and the fighting, where you were put in the ring, and it didn't matter if it was if you're fighting a girl, if you're fighting a man. So we were broke up after that, because I ended up fighting a lot of men that night, and my back was broken. But the following day, we did a special forces task called Scratch. Scratch is basically where you have 30 kg in your bag, and you are crawling through muck for, I think it was about 5 or 6 hours. But it wasn't even muck, it was like the silt on the riverbank. But for me, physically, I'd never been that tired before. It was all arms, we were army crawling the whole way. And I think just unfortunate for me, I was at the back of the line, which made me stand out. And I just had a DS literally walk every step with me and be like, you ready to give me your number? Are you going home today? You ready? And I guess you don't get that kind of nearly abuse when you're training in the gym, or when you're training for a triathlon or a marathon or whatever it is. You don't have your coach constantly in your ear being like, are you ready to give up? And for me, it was like the little voice of doubt that I've always had in my head when I'm training, or when I don't want to do something, or when I don't want to leave the comfort zone. That was an actual voice this time, in the form of a DS. For me, that was one of the most physically draining things I've ever done in my life. The second one was obviously the bridge. Mentally jumping off that bridge. I was the last one to jump off. I was completely on my own. Nobody was saying anything about what was going to happen. I literally in my head, standing on Mizenhead on the bridge, looking down at the water, thinking they actually want me to jump in. In my head, I thought I was going to hit the water, like on reflection. It's absurd. There was nothing but rocks there. But it's mad where your mind will take you if you let it, you know, and all it took was literally one thought of self-doubt, and I was all over the place. Luckily enough, I was able to compose myself and everything was fine. The third, I suppose, was at the end when we were what would you say, kidnapped. We were blindfolded and put in stress positions for 9 hours, listening to music that was like some sort of German music with a baby crying, and it, horrendous. If I heard it again, I'd say I'd start crying. But for me, and it wasn't a physical challenge, you know, it was completely mental. For me, I just couldn't think of anything worse again in my life. And do you know what? Like since then, the psychologist told us that they actually do use those still to this day, those ways of getting information out of people. And I can understand why it would bring you to a place that you've never been before.
And so when you're at your breaking point, like this little voice in your head, as you said, like what is that voice saying that's just like keep going? Like what is that saying when you feel like you're literally about to die? Like what is that voice telling you?
I suppose for me it was the old Clara, like I'll call her the fat Clara. She was like, I couldn't have done it, so you better do it. Do you know, and I think when you reach that point, you always come back to your why. Why am I doing this? Do you know, because if your why isn't strong enough, then you won't do it. And for me, as I said, this was like nearly the accumulation of where I had come in the past 3 years to this point, and nothing was going to let me drop out. Do you know, I was not giving my number over for love nor money. But for me, that voice was just the old Clara being like, you know, I couldn't have done it. So you've done so much with your life, and you've progressed so much and developed so much that you are strong enough to get through it. As well as that, I couldn't go back and tell Tony I dropped out. I couldn't, because at the time, obviously, nobody knew I was doing it apart from my coach and my boss. So I just couldn't go back to those two people and say, oh, literally, I lasted a few days. I had to stay true.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That answer. Just the old Clara and stuff. And yeah, very good. What would you say is the biggest kind of like lesson you took from that whole experience?
To never give up, I think. Do you know? And I think there was one guy on the show with us, and he always had a mantra, you know, and you know, I not that I don't believe in them, but you know, one mantra that he said that stuck with me is, this too shall pass. Do you know, and everything that I've done since then, I've always come back to that. No matter how you feel in life, whether you're feeling really good or whether you're feeling really bad, that time is going to pass. So you might as well just get on with it. Do you know, even when it comes to training, comes to relationships, comes to work, you know, whatever stage you are at in your life, and that stage is going to pass. So yeah, that was
Brilliant.
kind of one thing.
Brilliant. And how much did that experience open your eyes to how much of a mental game all of this is? Because, you know, I feel like even when you go in and you go running on the treadmill and, you know, you feel like your body's about to give out, but when you just kind of push it, you can just keep going. Like, obviously your boundaries were pushed. Like, did it surprise you how much your body could actually do in those situations?
Yeah, I think for me, when I left the show, I thought, oh, wow. You know, I'd heard about Goggins saying we actually only use, you know, whatever it is, 40% We actually only work to 40% and we don't actually use the other 60%. And for me, I was like, do you know what? I'm going to start asking more of my body, because the more I ask for it, the more it's going to give me. And for me, I kind of started seeing things as being limitless, and my expectations of myself and where I could bring myself physically started to go up and up and up. That was one thing that I did take from the show. I thought for me, I was like, this is the beginning of where I could actually go. Mentally, which is ironic, I came away from that experience a completely shattered person, horrendously shattered. I'd say I was a shell of myself for the first 3 months afterwards. And then I went to counselling and realised that what I thought was going to be the pinnacle of all of this good mental health, like thinking that I'd done and all this work that I'd done on myself, that this was the finale. It actually made me think that I hadn't even scratched the surface on stuff that had happened in the past and where I was. Like, I thought I was this super strong-minded person, you know, who could achieve anything. And physically, yeah, I could, you know, and it was only the start for me physically. Mentally, I was like, oh God, I have some work to do here. So that's, I suppose, when I said, do you know what, the best teacher now is going to be myself. I'm very stubborn, you know. I don't like hearing from other people my faults and my weaknesses. And I said, you know what, I know exactly what they are. So I ended up signing up for a master's in psychology, and I just said to myself, do you know what, I'm going to go and learn more about this. And at the beginning, it was just another part of my journey of helping myself. And it just became so much more in the 2 years that I was doing it. It was a huge thing for me to really delve into my own mind, to go and seek help, to go and talk to a counsellor, to get professional help. And I know it's still such a taboo subject, that we have to, a lot of people who don't know me but know of me would say, oh, she's super fit, super strong-minded, super resilient, but it's not the case. I still work on myself every single day of the week, and I think everyone should. I suppose I'm lucky enough that my small circle of friends are very like-minded people, and we'd often talk about things on a kind of deeper level. And that's what I like about my circle of friends, because you can really talk about how you feel. And it's funny, because when I'm in work and I say something, some of the teachers are like, oh, are you okay? And I'm like, oh no, I'm just really open. Like if I'm having a bad day, like I'll say, oh look, I'd often head off at lunchtime for a stroll or whatever, and I'd come back and I'd make a joke, being like, oh, I was just getting the mental health steps in, and teachers would be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm grand now, like, But for me, it was a funny experience, because I came away from the show thinking, wow, my body is capable of so much than I ever had thought, especially when I was 120 kg. But mentally, I was like, oh God. Oh,
so you touched on like the counselling there, and like I agree, it is such like a taboo subject, and it's something I've done in the past. Something I would suggest, anyone who's struggling to kind of give it a go. Why do you feel like it's so powerful to kind of talk about these things? Like, I think for me, like, these podcasts honestly help a lot for me, because I think when you're talking out loud, stuff that in your head, like, it only clicks with you when you actually say it out loud. And sometimes as I'm saying stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, but I hadn't actually like pre-thought about this before.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what was so good about like the counseling. Like, why do you think it's such a powerful thing that people should not kind of turn their nose up towards?
Well, I just think it's important, because like I could sit down and have a conversation with you about like a particular experience or something, but it's not until you actually go to a professional who and somebody that you don't know that's willing to bring it back to wherever it started, or whatever trauma you have, or whatever bad feeling that you have, unless you're bringing it back to the source, I don't think you ever solve the problem. And a lot
Mm.
of people will say, if you met your friends and say, oh, I'm not feeling well because this happened today, it's not because of what happened today, it's because of what happened last week, last month, last year, back to the beginning. And I think, professionals are there for that reason, and since studying it and getting a better understanding of how the mind works, I do think it's important. Especially I see it in school every day, and that's with younger kids, how important the whole area of mental health is,
Yeah.
to just be more open.
Yeah. And just, being able to dig deeper. Yeah.
Mm.
So what's next for Clara?
Um, well, I've had a kind of year of endurance this year. So sporting wise, I did the 2 marathons. So I did a weighted marathon there with one of my friends. We ran the Greenway in a weighted vest. And then I did the Kilkenny Marathon. I came third in the Kilkenny Marathon, which is a huge thing for me, because I'm
Mm.
not a runner, I'm not an endurance athlete. And it's funny because there was a man at the end line who was like, geez, your one that came third, like, ran well, didn't she? And I knew exactly what he meant. Like, I don't look like a runner.
Mm.
I don't have the body to run to endurance. But it was a whole kind of year of training for that. I did a few CrossFit competitions and stuff. But coming on from that, I did a bit of testing out in what was WIT, SETU. And I did a bit of testing with one of the lecturers out there and found out that I actually am a little bit of a hybrid athlete. So I'm really good at power and strength, but I'm good at endurance as well for somebody of my size and shape. So long story short, I ended up getting involved with Cycling Ireland in the last few weeks. So I'm actually trialing for the national squad at the minute. So I'm taking a step away from endurance and going into sprint track cycling. So this is the next big thing for me. Everything I do, I give 100%. So I'm really excited about this one because I've always I have big legs, and I've always kind of been like, surely they can be put to use somehow. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, to getting away on a training camp with Cycling Ireland and just see where its strengths and weaknesses are. And I won't make Paris, but I'm optimistic that I'll get to the Olympics someday.
Amazing. Amazing. And so one question I wanted to kind of wrap the show up with is, obviously someone like you who's been through so many different things like the marathons and all the competitions, and it's all very like performance based stuff. And while they like, it must feel unreal kind of when you get to the finishing or you're winning stuff. But what is happiness to you now? Do you get it from those things? Is it in your daily routine, or what is happiness for you?
I think happiness for me is the people, I suppose, around me being happy. It's you are your environment, you become your environment, and the people around me are so supportive, so happy, so positive, and it kind of has a mirror effect on who I am as a person. And I just feel like, I'm at that stage in my life now where I am extremely happy with every aspect of my life. So happiness for me, it's not even, it's been able to do the things that I do. It's been able to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go for a 10K run. My body is allowing me to do that. I am waking up today, it's being here, and being around family and friends. Everything else I think is irrelevant.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Clara, I really enjoyed that chat, and it was so good getting an insight into your mind because, I'm going to take an awful lot from this, and I would imagine anyone who listens in as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your story.
Thanks a million.